The mainstream of poetry in the 18th century had been orderly and polished without much feeling for nature. Heroic couplets were used for this verse, but various writers had broken away from the form and the thoughts. In spite of this, the publication of the first edition of the lyrical ballad came as a shock. The critic considered the language too simple and the change too violent. This important book, the signal of the beginning of the Romantic Age, was the joint work of William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge, often known with Southey as the Lake Poets because they like the district in the northwest of England and live in it. Wordsworth was a poet of nature. He had the special ability to throw a charm over ordinary things. Coleridge, on the other hand, could make mysterious events acceptable to the reader's mind. Neither of them used the old language of poetry much. Wordsworth was so filled with the love of the nature that in the later edition of the lyrical ballad, he said that the language of poetry ought to be the same as the language of simple farm worker. Yet he couldn't keep this idea himself. His imagination led him far beyond the life and thoughts of a countryman. Coleridge's poems, The Rime of Ancient Manor, appeared in the first edition of the lyrical ballad. Two other important poems by Coleridge, but it's not in the lyrical ballads, are Christabel and Kubla Khan. Wordsworth's part in the lyrical ballads was more difficult to perform successfully than Coleridge's, for he had to make ordinary things seem wonderful. Lord Byron was a romantic figure, but his poetry was much influenced by the classical form of pop. Byron dressed splendidly, went to fight for the freedom of Greece, satirized many sides of English life, and hated all the fools. One of his poems written in the Spenserian stanza, it's called Child Harlot. In the following years, Byron wrote several narrative poems about the East, the Pride of Abydos, and Don John. Byron wrote a number of short poems which are popular, but his plays are not very good. But his poetry was popular because he attacked false ideas. Bryony Shelly was a greater poet of good family, restless and rich. He struggled against the cause of human misery and against accepted religions. He saw goodness in the whole of nature, and he wanted all men to be free. His first important poem, Alastair, is in blank verse. Another is The Revolt of Islam. The poem is written in the Spenserian stanza, which is not suitable. John Keats was a 19th century writer who loved beauty and studied poets and nature. He was known for writing odes such as Ode to Nightingale and Ode to Autumn. He also wrote good ballads such as Les Ballades d'Amson's Mercy, about not a dream of his lady, but wakes alone on a cold hillside. William Blake was a 19th century writer and artist who is regarded as a seminal figure of the Romantic Age. His writings have influenced countless writers and artists through the age, and he has been deemed both major poet and original thinkers. His painting and poetry have been characterized as part of the Romantic movement and pre-Romantic for its large appearance in the 18th century. Reverent of the Bible but hostile to the Church of England. Blake was influenced by the ideals and imposition of the French and American Revolution, though later he rejected many of these political beliefs. Some of his notable works, The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, and The Four Zeus,